next on 7 News at noon.
We have breaking news today. A RedLine train taking off with no one at the controls. The operator suffering minor injuries.
The train now stopped and a major investigation happening right now. We have Team 7 coverage.
Also this noon, Donald Trump with harsh words for President Obama just ahead of his visit to New Hampshire tonight.
Temperatures continuing to climb as we've dried on out. How long this mild weather lasts ahead.
All that and a lot more.
Coming up next at noon.
This is 7 News at noon.
Breaking news at noon. A RedLine train full of passengers traveling down the tracks without a conductor. It left Braintree at 6:08 this morning.
MBTA crews finally stopped it in Dorchester. They say the conductor was hit and hurt, and the train just left without him. So quite a story. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Krista Delkamp.
And I'm Sarah French. We have Team 7 coverage of this breaking news story. The RedLine train departed inbound from Braintree Station around 6:10 this morning. It passed by several stops. Crews eventually killed the power to the third rail and got it to stop at North Quincy Station. 7's Nicole Oliverio begins our coverage live in Braintree. Nicole, you actually spoke with the passenger who was on board at the time.
We did, Sarah, and that passenger tells us that they got onto that RedLine train here at Braintree just around 6 o'clock this morning with no indication that there was anything wrong and no indication that there was no operator. They said they got on board, the doors closed, and the train took off as it normally would in the morning. They said it wasn't until they got to Quincy that all of a sudden the train began to slow down, the lights began to dim, and then they were stopped. They said the problem was they had no idea what was going on. They didn't know if the train was disabled. That's when some of the passengers obviously became a little bit antsy. Were trying to get off the train, trying to figure out what was going on. Now, the passengers that were in the car closest to where the operator should have been, that's when they realized that there was no conductor on board. So they said after about 30 minutes, that's when another T operator came on without saying exactly what had happened, took all of those passengers on board to the JFK UMass station. It was at that point that those passengers deboarded, but they said they were still given no explanation of what had happened. So you can imagine just how frustrating that was for those passengers as they were waiting without having any idea of what happened.
Everything was normal, nothing unusual. When I arrived, it was around 5:53 in the morning because I paid the parking. Everything was normal. The first train that was on the right side left, so we went on the train was on the left side. Nothing unusual, nothing that I would say, something's off. So it was really, really weird. It was really confusing. It was when everything was dark, everything was stopped. And we were trying to open the doors and we couldn't. And we were trying to press the button to the emergency room and nobody heard. And the people that was on the first car was trying to knock on the door of the conductor, and that's when we discovered that there was nobody there. So we had no idea. I wasn't too nervous because there was other people and we were trying to communicate. My only concern was, people trying to open the train when we don't know what's going on. That was my biggest.
Were they trying to open the doors as it was moving?
Yeah. No, when it was stopped. There was people that was trying to even break the windows so we could get out, which I was not going to do because I don't know if the third line is on or off. Some people were trying to break the windows. Most of the people were trying just to open the doors, and some other people were just trying to call and see what's going on. I know people call the MBTA to say what happened, but we really didn't hear anything. I just decided to be quiet and wait. I don't understand anything about trains. I'm not going to try to do anything.
So obviously the MBTA is trying to figure out exactly what happened. Governor Baker spoke earlier. He said they're looking into the possibility as to whether or not this train may have been tampered with. But what we are hearing from sources, when officers responded this morning, they responded to somebody hurt on the platform hit by a train. That was obviously the operator who should have been on board that RedLine train. Now, what we are hearing is that the operator's account is that they were trying to manually switch one of the switchers, that the train jerked forward, and that's when the operator was hit, and that's when the train took off. We are trying to confirm that, see if in fact the operator's story is exactly what happened, but we will continue to follow the story throughout the day. The MBTA saying that passenger safety is the utmost important and that no passengers were hurt while this incident was happening. But again, it is going to be continued to be investigated. We're live in Braintree. Nicole Oliverio, 7 News.
The train involved is now at a rail yard in Dorchester, and 7's Byron Barnett is live there with more. Byron?
Yeah, we're over at the Cabot Yard where the train has been for quite a while now. Just take a look at it sitting right here. This is the 6-car RedLine train sitting here in the Cabot Yard. You can see as you look at it, it's not much activity here. There have been a number of investigators on the scene within the past hour or so. If you look closely, you can see all the doors of the cars are open. We don't know what that signifies. Perhaps when this is the way the train was when people got off. Perhaps this is what the investigators were looking at. This yard is where all the buses and the trains have maintenance performed, and there's training here as well. In addition to the investigators and maintenance people, if you swing the camera a little bit farther, you see a couple of officers, MBTA transit officers standing here. The police are here as well. Police, investigators, maintenance people, all going over this train, trying to figure out what happened here. Was this some kind of operator error, or was there something else? So right now, it's pretty quiet here. As you can see, the train is just sitting in the Cabot Yard, pretty much we're just waiting here to see what the investigators come up with. Not much activity right now, but the train is secure while investigators try to figure out exactly what happened to cause this train to take off and on its own. So that's the latest live here in Boston. I'm Byron Barnett, 7 News.
Byron, thank you. Meantime, the Boston FBI office is confirming they're aware of what happened and that they're in contact with MBTA Transit Police. For the latest on this, let's head live to Dorchester, and you see 7's Dan Housley. Dan, what's happening there?
Well, a lot of the passengers originally got off here the first time that the train stopped and then was brought into this station. But the investigation being handled by the MBTA, but we're getting some indications about what happened from the governor's office. Originally, the MBTA was telling us that a safety system on the train had been disabled, but that left room for was it disabled intentionally or otherwise. Now the governor's office is telling us that controls were tampered with on the train. The governor's office confirming tampering with controls on the train, and they say these trains are designed not to operate when there is no driver. A lot of passengers asking us about a dead man switch that wouldn't allow the train to operate, and the governor's office saying they are indeed designed not to operate if there is not a driver there. So something was changed, and the governor's office words, tampered with. The FBI also looking in on this, but right now an MBTA investigation, but the FBI say they are monitoring this situation. This comes as we get a statement from the MBTA's general manager in which he says passenger safety is the highest priority for the MBTA, and this highly troubling incident is under investigation by transit police detectives. A spokesperson for the governor saying Governor Baker is grateful no passengers were injured in this troubling incident and will be monitoring the investigation closely. So again, you have the MBTA taking the lead here, and there are investigators looking into it. The governor's office telling us that controls were tampered with, and the FBI saying they're keeping an eye on what's happening and what is learned. We're live in Dorchester. Dan Housley, 7 News.
Dan, thank you. We want to mention that Governor Baker is at an event in Plymouth right now. This is the Plymouth County Sheriff's Training Center. He is due to speak about what happened on the Red Line today, and if and when he does step up to the podium during this live broadcast, we'll of course bring that to you right here on 7. We also want to let you know we'll be staying on top of this breaking news all throughout the day, both on air and online. So you can check WHDH.com and the 7 News mobile apps for the latest information. We'll also be putting new details on Facebook and Twitter as well.
Also on 7, the murder trial of a teenager accused of raping and killing his high school math teacher is getting close to going to the jury.
But there are some more proceedings happening today. Let's go to 7's Victoria Warren. She's outside the courthouse with more. Vicki?
Yeah, and there's potentially yet another delay with this trial. Today was supposed to be a procedural day where they talk about jury instructions, but now they're in recess as the judge has to consider a motion from the defense. They want to include some new evidence, even though they've already rested it, and the judge is actually considering it.
On the eve of closing arguments, on a day when the jury isn't even present, another possible delay in the murder trial against teen suspect Philip Chisholm.
That seems fundamentally unfair to Commonwealth on the eve of closing arguments.
At issue, brain scans that Judge David Lowy already ruled aren't allowed in his evidence based on his questioning of a defense witness done without the jury present.
The problem with Dr. Gurr is I don't believe him. I just don't believe him.
The defense wasn't allowed to say the scans show Chisholm, who is accused of killing his math teacher, Colleen Ritzer, is schizophrenic. Now the defense wants to say the scans can also explain why he may have faked other psychiatric tests.
It refutes the feigning of extreme mental health symptoms, which is the Commonwealth's case.
The judge left debating if he'll have to take the drastic step of flying this doctor in to testify without the jury present if the scans can now be used in the way the defense wants to argue.
And the judge needs to make his ruling soon. Also, Philip Chisholm was present this morning despite yesterday saying he didn't want to be there, but he has decided he does not want to be present for the rest of the afternoon. Live in Salem, Victoria Warren, 7 News.
All right, we're going to get back to our breaking news of the day. We've been hearing about this train that left a station there in Braintree, a RedLine train without a driver. We've been telling you how the state's governor is due to address this situation, and there you see him coming out of the doors here of the Plymouth County Sheriff's Training Center. This is in Plymouth. He's been there for a scheduled meeting of the Massachusetts Sheriff's Association, but obviously given today's events, many questions surrounding what happened there at this station that left so many people frightened. Let's listen.
Good afternoon. So I think as many people know, there was a train that left Braintree this morning that was unmanned, passed through 4 stations, stopped. The passengers were let off. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. The train itself was determined that it was unmanned and traveling from Braintree within a couple of minutes of when it left. The power on the 3rd rail was shut off at that point in time, but the train coasted because it had momentum at that point forward through several stations before it came to a stop. Inspection of the train determined that some of the controls had been manipulated, and there's an ongoing investigation right now that involves folks from the MBTA, from DOT, and from public safety. From what we can tell at this point, it appears to be an isolated incident.
Governor, is the FBI involved in the investigation, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, at this point, they are not involved. I believe it's public safety, DOT, and the MBTA.
You said this morning it was tampered with. Is that? Are you
manipulated, tampered with? There was a. It's pretty clear that it was set in forward motion, which is why it moved in the first place when the signal was manipulated. But as I said, within a couple of minutes of it leaving, it was the 3rd rail was turned off and it coasted through several stations.
The motorman, what was his role to the best of your knowledge? It was explained to me that he detected something wrong with the train, got out to check it. Is that
something with the signal was wrong, and he got out to check the signal,
and then it went forward.
And then it went forward.
Last question.
Is it being investigated that he had something to do with the tampering? Do you know?
The investigation is going to obviously involve questions. People are talking to him, and they'll talk to others as well. But I don't want to draw conclusions about that until the investigation is a little further along.
I mean, how disturbing is this? I mean, are people safe taking?
Well, look, this is, as I said, at this point we believe this is an isolated incident, and I think the system overall is running on normal schedule in a normal way. This particular incident's being investigated on its own. But as I said, within a couple of minutes of that train leaving the station, they cut the power and it coasted until it stopped.
To the best of your knowledge, is it conceivable, Governor, that this motorman put something in gear, then saw a signal and said, "Oh, I better get out," and made a mistake?
I don't want to get too hypothetical about this, but I think the big question at this point that you're asking, Bill, is the right one. You know, the discussion that's going to take place on our end is going to be negligence versus something else, right?
Is tampering a question?
It's pretty clear the main control that drives the train was tampered with. But as Bill just said, I think the big issue on this is whether it was a negligence issue or something else.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you going to the Celtics game tomorrow?
So it looks like the headline coming out of this here is that the state's governor has been kept aware of the situation on the Red Line earlier today, and it looks like at this point this is an isolated incident, that this was perhaps a case of negligence that he was talking about. Just to bring you up to speed, if you're just joining us, this all happened earlier today when this train that you're looking at left the station on its own without a driver, no one operating it. So the big question here, why, how did this happen? He does say it appears the controls had been manipulated, but to what end and why, that still remains a mystery. We also know that that worker who was supposed to be operating that train got out at some point. It sounds like to check a signal, and that's when he was injured. And very important to note, we were reporting earlier correctly that the FBI was being kept aware of this situation just as a precaution, given the state of affairs around the globe today. And there you heard the state's governor saying that the FBI at this time is not involved.
Yeah, the governor saying that the MBTA, DOT, and public safety are the ones involved right now. We're going to take a quick break. We'll have much more on this breaking news and our other top stories after the break.